pressure.
No pressure at all.
Yeah.
All right, Zach. Welcome to Doing the Thing podcast. This is where we're talking about all things outdoor ed. And you and I, we were just talking about this. We're at the outdoor school out in Texas, and you are now in Guam,
Yep.
and actually are thankful to being there to go out to Guam the first time, as I'm like sitting in a closet and you have your beachfront
Yeah, it's not
property.
bad. Like I said, the office could be worse. We're right here in Tumon Bay, Guam. So I mean, we got the ocean right here. Just to give your viewers a little quick view of what my office looks like. But yeah, I mean, I work for a resort out here. So I'm not doing outdoor education per se, but I'm taking that expertise that I learned while I was there and applying it to a more resort setting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so how did you so the story starts of you're at
Yeah, I mean, look,
you're
I've lived in 15 different places over the past 10 years at least. And that's not even counting the places I've stayed for, a couple 2 weeks at a time for a season. I lived out in Olympic National Park for a month, so I don't know if that counts, but I count it. So, yeah, I started this journey. I graduated college with a degree in finance and accounting, and I have not really used it since, outside of looking at budget reports and stuff. But we met out in Marble Falls at an outdoor school, and one of our coworkers, Celine, she told me about this place in Guam, PIC, and she sold it. I was supposed to be a lifeguard and come out here, and they pay for your flight and stuff. So I flew out here, and I mean, I just haven't left. I fell in love with Guam, so I spend maybe half the year in Guam and half the year kind of traveling around to other places. Um, but I just kind of worked my way up. I started as a lifeguard, and then they hired me to do the activities, and then pretty soon I was training for doing the activities, and then pretty soon I was recruiting people that I would then train for the activities. And then pretty soon I was recruiting for the resorts in just, Guam and just different areas from people I've met. And, you know how outdoor school is. I mean, this industry is pretty small. Like, we all kind of stay connected once you meet somebody. So, networking, I guess, for lack of a better one-word answer.
so you graduated with a degree in finance. How did you end up in outdoor ed then?
I was looking for a job. I didn't want to do finance. My first job was as a portfolio manager. So I was running executive portfolios in Walmart for the first 6 months, and I hated every minute of it. I mean, we were working like 12-hour days, 6 days a week. I was getting paid well, but there's more to life than that. So I was like, look, I'm leaving. I'm going to go do whitewater rafting in Colorado. And I did that for a little bit, for like a month in Echo Canyon. And then I heard about outdoor school from one of the guys there that had been in Texas, and I just applied and got the job, and the rest is history.
So is that your only like outdoor ed job, or did you end up doing
No,
some more?
no, dude. No,
No,
dude.
no, no.
I mean, okay. So I've
Like if
got,
you
so I've worked on high ropes courses. I was a camp counselor at summer camp. I taught archery programs. I mean, if you count all the resort stuff, I've designed outdoor programs where we like do, at Marble Falls, how we used to do 3-2-1 contact earth. We do something kind of like that with seashell finding. So we get seashells and we look at like how they form. We talk about like calcium and like how these shells form over thousands of years, and like how the beaches in Guam are just a collection of shells, and those are geological forces and tides and all kinds of stuff. So I just took the knowledge that I've learned from outdoor education, and I've just kind of reapplied it in different areas.
that is incredible. So then how did you like did you just like was TOS your first outdoor ed job, or like did you fall in love with it at
Second,
that point, or was it
second. I mean, okay, so
second?
I
'Cause-
went to camp as a kid. So
okay.
from the time I was 8 to like 15, and one of your questions about like what early memories and stuff. My summer camp, I learned how to horseback ride, shoot. I got my American Archer, so that takes, for anybody that knows, it takes a long time to do that because you have to shoot at targets from 20, 30, 40, 50 yards. You have to score a certain amount. If you mess up, your scores get reset and you have to do it again. So it took me about 4 years to do that. I learned how to shoot. We had a master's program for riflery that I took when I was a kid. I learned how to play polo. We took camp craft, so I learned about like knot tying and setting snares and stuff there. We had a waterfront, so I learned how to kayak and canoe. We did different kinds of like J strokes, like canoe rescues, swamp canoes, that kind of thing. There was a sports program, so we had tennis, we had rock wall, all kinds of stuff. So I got exposed to that as a kid, and then I fell in love with it, and I just haven't ever looked back. I've just been outdoors like my entire life.
What so meeting Celine was is that your like
That was my,
where
I
your
guess,
story like really takes off, or
those
how
that
you
was
like
my
catalyst to get to here?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, like, because that was the professional catalyst, I suppose. Like, if I'd never met her, I never would have come to Guam, and I probably would not have worked for resorts. But I'm not convinced that I wouldn't have ended up in a national park anyway. Like, I worked at Jackson Hole in a bike shop in the Tetons just because I wanted to run the Tetons for 3 months. So I worked out there for 10 weeks. I had no experience in bikes beforehand, but we would like rent canoes and bikes to people, and then I was off by 3 o'clock and I would go run a trail, or I'd run before, like, whatever. We were a mile away from the park gate. So I could literally just run into Jackson Hole, like Tetons National Park, and then Sin Mountains for like a summer. So, I mean, I don't know if meeting her was my, I guess, jumping point, but it definitely was a start to, yes, meeting her definitely changed my life. I'm just not really sure how to quantify that.
So then, what? So for you, like, what has been your like biggest growth, and like, where does that come from?
Hmm. Well, it's an interesting question. That question is something I've been thinking about a lot more frequently the last like 3 years. It's like, what have I learned? Because to be just completely honest, cards on the table, my 20s was just spent like having a good time. I mean, yeah, I was working and I was learning skills and stuff, but at the end of the day, I was chilling on a chair in Guam, like hanging out in the ocean. And then when I was not working, I would buy a plane ticket to Southeast Asia and go travel around Thailand or Vietnam or Bali, Philippines. I've been to like 15 countries in Southeast Asia. So that is like what I want to do for fun. And then at some point, I asked myself the question of, well, what did I learn on this experience that is pretty unique? There's not a lot of people I talk to that have had my life experience. So I'm like, you know, how can I take that expertise and then transition it into a way that people who haven't had the same experience can understand? And that's just about finding common ground and putting it into a context that they're interested in.
Finding common ground and putting it into a context that they're interested in. Do you have a specific example that you could come up with offhand?
Yeah, I mean, for example, the Korean, not to pick on them, but they haven't been near beach. I mean, if you've ever been to Seoul, Korea, it's a city. So there's 10 million people there. There is no place to kayak and canoe. So, for example, the first time they come to Guam, they don't even know how to swim. So getting them into a kayak and pushing them out in the ocean is terrifying to them, right? So if you can then teach them something about Guam and say, hey, look at this really cool shell. Did you know, like, this is how shells form? And you put that into an understanding. Now, the other thing too is we have translators, so that kind of helps. So like when we're telling stories, we have a translator right there, like getting it across. So I can talk kind of nerdy to these kids, and some of them are excited. Like, if, for example, if I find a blue starfish and I pull that out of the ocean and I bring it to them, I'm like, they're out there, and now they're not afraid because they know they're blue starfish out there. So that's just a specific context. Is they care about the cool experience. They're afraid of kayaking. How can I show them that kayaking can also be fun? So that's just one example, but I do that in like hundreds of different ways because I design activity programs. So literally every single thing I do is, okay, I'm just going to assume my guest knows nothing about this. How can I take my knowledge, my expertise, and then apply that into a way where they can understand?
Oh my gosh, that is so wild. You're
Well,
like you're in Guam, like introducing the outdoors to like
Korean
just
children from halfway around the world. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
that. Because like, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Texas. I'm from Austin,
You're
an hour and a half away.
oh
But like, just to give you an example, we're closed right now. This is our nature trail. So at some point, I've got there's a company that we're working for that's going to be building this nature trail thing. And so what I want to do is we're going to plant all kinds of native species trees down this nature trail so that when they walk down to the beach to go have their cocktails or ride, kayaks or whatever, they also see all the fruit trees of Guam. And there's going to be like little QR codes with like a little fun fact about that, like that plant and how it came to Guam. Here's how coconut trees got here, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of like, as they're walking to do something else, you're kind of educating them on the way. And then those conversations they're going to ask you about. They're like, I didn't know that these are coconuts. And so then we have a coconut activity. So we show them how the coconut forms, and then we turn it into candy that they like. And now they like coconuts. And so the next time they see a coconut tree, they remember that activity, that kind of thing.
Have you been in one spot long enough where you've actually like met, like had like a kid or someone to come back and like either
All
work
the
with
time.
you or
All the time. All the time. Those are called repeater guests. And I can't tell you, probably hundreds of times, I've had kids that are like, I remember I was at PIC, look, and they show me a picture that, like, I don't remember, to be fair, because I take thousands of them. But, like, I pretend, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like, what are you going to do this time? That kind of thing. And then you talk to them about their new program. Because here's the deal about that. And you understand, once somebody has a good experience, they're more likely to repeat that same thing. So if you can take them from a high point and then you just transition them to another high point, that's how you get repeaters. And that's how you get people interested in the outdoors that are then going to be like, you know what? I really liked Guam. I'm going to get into marine biology, or I'm going to study the ocean. And like, that's how you can instill change in people from a very young age. So I just try to think, like, in my humble, profession, how can I help that as most as I possibly can?
see your work as like an extension of like introducing the outdoors to new people and like getting more people to care about it. Is that true?
Among other things. I mean, really, it's an extension of like the kind of lifestyle that I like to live. So if I can share that with somebody and put it in their context, if it also instills a change in them, great. If not, I've still had a good time doing it. So, I mean, it's kind of two-part there. I would do this even if I didn't have any kind of change occurring. I mean, it's a lot of fun just doing these programs with guests. So like that alone makes it worth it. But if I can also tie in an educational nature to that, well, I mean, that's two birds, one stone there. So
Sorry, I think that what you're doing is just like freaking crazy, and I don't know if I'd ever would have found out what you're doing if I didn't start this thing.
crazy how that
Um,
happens, right?
like so have you done any like reflecting about like the industry as like a whole, or you've just been like cruising and grooving on your
um, so yeah, I mean, I have done some reflection on that. My reflection is kind of multi-part. So let me just tie it into a context like your viewers will probably connect with, because my story's a little bit different, but I am trying to do outdoor education jobs, specifically the Park Service. So summer camps, any kind of like seasonal opportunities, hot spring jobs, all of these things. What I'm doing is, so I recruit for Guam, but there's also a resort in Edelweiss, Germany that offers housekeeping and all kinds of, like, they're another resort for military people. But then the people that are in hospitality majors, because I've been recruiting them, I've formed these connections, and I've worked at different kinds. I've worked at Olympic National Park, Tetons, Hot Springs. There's a couple of them in Texas, and then summer camps. And I've met people there that are now in different places. And I have a community that I basically manage that will send me information about different jobs that will pay for housing, will pay for food, will pay for transportation, kind of like TOS. And there's hundreds of these, thousands probably, but people don't know they exist. So when you have somebody that's younger that's looking like, hey, I want to get into an outdoor job, they don't pay that well. So you're having to sacrifice like financial stability for pursuing what you want to do. And I just don't I don't accept that. There's a way that we can merge the two. So if you guys knew, if your viewers and my potential audience that I'm going to get later in 2025, if I can teach them about these jobs and show them that it's really easy, and not only that, but help them with the application and hiring process, well, then I can coordinate with those places and then work out some kind of referral bonus later. But for now, I just need to get people to understand that they exist so that we start a trend of people applying for them, because I feel like one of the biggest challenges that outdoor education face is accessibility, and also knowledge that these programs are even out there, because they aren't advertised in school. I mean, the inner city kids have no idea they exist. Um, Maybe the more rural areas do, but even those, they're less densely populated, so it's harder to hit those marketing channels. So I don't know. And I do digital marketing too on the side. So I'm trying to think of ways to like figure out how to target these people and find, which is why I reached out to you, is because you have a target audience that is exactly what I'm going to be recruiting to in the next 3 to 6 months.
And then where does the like so you're like wanting to recruit for all of these places, and so are these places, do you pick out these places so that they're not places that they're like you have to make that financial sacrifice for, or
So if you had a place that paid for your transportation. So they paid for your ticket, they gave you a gas stipend or whatever. They paid for food and they paid for your housing. Those three things, if you gave most people who are wanting to do outdoor education, they don't mind camping, they don't mind sleeping on the ground, they don't mind cooking from a camp stove. So quite frankly, it's not that expensive to live that kind of lifestyle, especially when food and housing is already paid for. So you could save most of that money. So although I can't have these jobs pay more, I can give the viewers and the people that I'm recruiting for the tools that they need in order to save the most amount of money possible. So, and then once we get it going, then you can start to use that leverage to push these companies to pay more, because right now they're going to pay minimum wage. But if you're like, no, you're going to lose your most qualified people, it's going to cost you this in recruiting, blah, blah, blah. Why don't we just pay them 50% or 100% more, and you keep the best instructors there? They learn the program inside and out. And now people are coming back year after year instead of having these really good instructors move around because they want to experience a bunch of stuff, but they just can't make enough money to live.
then what do you say to the people who are like the mentality is like we've simplified the job so much that like anybody can do it, like anybody that we like get what we need from like the turnover or whatever, like that
So
doesn't bother us.
to those people, I would argue that they're overlooking one of the most fundamental, important values that can be added by a person who is actively seeking out these jobs and expecting like that. Okay, so ultimately, if you care about the outdoors, if that is your goal, you want to share your love with the world about the outdoors, you're going to take a certain degree of passion that is above the standard, operating quota of most people. So you're going to approach that job to give it your entire heart, right? But what happens when companies don't pay people for that, it creates an environment that people are like, well, why bother? Why put forth the extra effort that I know I can do, because they're not going to pay me to do that? So my argument to these people that are saying, oh, well, we can hire anybody to do it, I would say you've oversimplified the job. Because here's what you really want to do. You want to have the baseline, 60% of the job, anybody can do it. But the 40%, that's the creative aspect. You give your instructors the freedom to take the same base program, but then add their own personality, their own flair, their own expertise. You merge programs together, and that's how you get collaboration versus this cookie cutter version of a program. The kids aren't going to remember that cookie cutter version of a program that somebody's just reading off of a script telling to them. They're going to remember that person that is able to, every single tree, they tell them different fun facts about it. Or, oh, look, there's a bug that flew across. You want to hear this cool fact about that bug? Oh, look at this rock. Have you thought about how this rock forms here? Like, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look at this seed. What do you think the seed is going to turn into? Right? Like those kind of customization, that's truly where the value is. And so to those people, I would say that if you would pay them what they're worth, you will make more in revenue from people wanting to come, from word of mouth, from, internal promotion of marketing from pre-existing clients would be exponentially greater. But people don't think like that because they see the bottom line like one for one. But that's not how it works. That's not how the world works. Branding is very important. So that's what I would say to those people.
God, I wish that more companies like actually gave a shit about that. Like
Yeah, no fucking
it's
shit.
so
Work on
easy
the
just
core.
to be like, okay, well, you don't care, then I don't care, then I'm gonna move on.
Yep. And then you wasted all of that training. I mean, how long was that employee there for? How much does a year of training cost you? Well, that's what walked out of the door because you wanted to pay a minimum wage. I mean, if you started somebody, just as an example, if you figured out that recruitment costs were half of what you pay people, then what you could do is for the first year, you pay them your minimum wage and you say, listen, if you're in the top 10%, we'll give you another contract and we'll double your salary, right? Like whatever you got paid before, if you're the top 10%, we're going to double you, because you're taking your top 10%, you're doubling them there, you're keeping them there. And then what that's going to do is you now have your training core. So that 10% can teach the new 90% that are coming in. And now that 90% are all up to the 10%, which means that you've effectively 10 times your talent pool because you've allowed your best 10% to stay. I mean, let them teach your new staff. That's free training. If you don't think that's valuable, you've never run a company. Like, or department for that matter.
Oh God, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I have stories on that one too of just like what people are doing and what they've said to me. And I'm like, are you sure? Really? You don't aren't making decisions based on the budget? Like,
Yep.
okay. Do you
But I
what's
mean, you can look up the statistic on this, but I think like 90% of businesses break even or lose money. So like if you're going to do stuff like the rest of everybody else, you're going to be in the same position. And the fact of the matter is they don't make money. So why are you going to copy what they're doing? You know, so do something different is my point.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one of why are we doing stuff that doesn't get us forward in the mission and the money. Like the money needs to come like mission and money are like two hands of the same thing or something.
Yep.
Where it's like if you can't have mission without money, but if you don't have money, you won't be able to forward your mission. Do you have any like standout moments that you've had in your career as far as like with like fellow clients with your clients?
What do you mean specifically? What do you like? What
Like
moments do you?
just like a moment that you've had that you've like have held on to that you're like, oh, this is why I do it, or it's something along the lines of like, something that's been like, oh my gosh, like this is the one moment, like if I could have
I
like
mean,
one interaction or like one class with somebody that you are like, this is what it's all about.
well, I mean, yes and no. The no to this is that I don't think there's been one particular moment. I think that the most rewarding thing for me has been seeing how tiny little changes that I implement because of things I've learned or because I'll mix in like outdoor, education into the program will instill like it's almost like a domino effect. Like I'll put something in motion and then like a year later, I'll have that same guest come back and tell me about that program that I did. And I'm like, ah, like that is the full circle connection there. Like there it is. It's like the aha moment that's created. But I guess like when they first started to come in, it took like a year, right? Because like they have to come back to Guam. So like the first time I started doing this kind of thing, and I do this every single day now, I'll change something. I think, crap, it's gonna bother me. There's a Japanese saying, it's Kaizen. So Kaizen is basically what Toyota did, and it talks about getting 1% better every single day, right? So if you can get 1% better every single day, so that motto is something that I've tried to instill is that every single day there's room for improvement. So what's cool to see is that if you do that every single day, eventually when you come back to the circle, you've already had 365 1% improvement. So if you keep doing them, you start to see the growth then. And so, like, for example, I'll say something to somebody, and then maybe the first year, like, 2 or 3 people come back and they see me. And then the third year, maybe there's 30 people that come back and see me. And then the next year, there's 300 people that are taking pictures with staff that I've trained that have been doing the same thing. And it's like, because of that one little tiny change that happened 3 years ago, it's like, look at this kind of manifests itself. And so I think that's really cool that as like outdoor education instructors, you can teach somebody who's in third or fifth grade that will then later become an instructor 10 or 15 years later. I think that literally, we're planting seeds in people's minds that then grow into trees, hopefully, but sometimes they don't. I mean, not all seeds make it, but the thing is if we get one of those trees to make it, they can then spread seeds to others. So it's the exact same thing that we teach. It's just with people's minds, not actual physical seeds. It's with ideas.
All right, tell me now, what's the coolest part of your job currently?
I mean, there's a lot. The location's pretty sick. The work-life balance is nice because like I'm in a very social job, so I meet a lot of people. I meet a lot of other recreation people. So, all the pools I have access to. I have access to jet skis. I have access to boats. I mean, I can go deep sea fishing, free diving, spear fishing. So, like, I guess work-life balance is the best part of my job. I mean, I work technically, but it doesn't feel like work. And then when I'm not working, I'm playing, and the playing definitely doesn't feel like work. So, I mean, yeah.
If there was so if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, would you be okay with that?
That's fine. Yeah,
They
they
were
can reach
looking
out.
for a job, and then where would that be?
I right now have 11 locations that I recruit for. So I recruit for PIC both in Guam and Saipan. So there's two PIC resorts. They got one in Japan, but you have to speak Japanese. So I don't know if your viewers will do that. there's language skills for a lot of these places. So Club Med, I recruit for 11 different resorts in Club Med. 6 of them you need to speak Spanish for because they're in South America. If you only speak English, you can go to Florida. That one just transitioned. They just sold it. There's one in Punta Cana, Cancun, Turks and Caicos, and then Beaches in the Dominican Republic. I recruit for a resort in Edelweiss, Germany. It's called Edelweiss in Edelweiss, Germany. It's a military R&R, but you have to pass a military background check. So if you have any kind of like misdemeanors or anything like that, it disqualifies you. And then there's besides that, there's a park service job in Dornans, which is right outside the Tetons. They're like a bike shop. I used to work there, so I still maintain those connections. There's about 5 different summer camps that I have contacts for the hiring managers there. And then aside from that, it's just like the seasonal work kind of stuff, but that's a little harder to recruit for because it's only for a month or 2 at a time. So most of the jobs that I recruit for are 3 to 6 month contracts. A couple of them go up to a year. But yeah, most of them are around 6 months. It just kind of depends what they're looking for. I got them in the mountains. Most of them are on beach. Probably 70% of them are on beaches, but I would say probably 20% are in the mountains, and the rest of them are kind of spread out. Like some of them are in the city, actually, one of them, but they drive out to the hill country. So that one's actually out of Austin. There's an outdoor education school that is trying to partner with like Camp Champions and some other places, and so I'm going to try to lubricate those tracks for them.
That is incredible.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of places you guys can they can shoot me a message here in 2025. I mentioned I don't have it launched yet because I'm still building it and I'm writing some content for it. But I'm going to be launching a blog, and that's going to be just about like the stuff I'm talking about. I write about like cognitive frameworks and like social change and stuff too. But I also am going to be doing a recruiting page on there to recruit for the jobs, because I'm basically going to use that to fund the page. So if they go through, I'll get paid from the resorts themselves, so it's going to be completely free for users to use. I'll get paid from the resorts once I send them there, but I'm going to basically just automate the recruiting process so that they don't have to go through like Indeed or CoolWorks or any of these other locations. I'll just put it in one place. So it's not open yet, but I'll message you when I get that launched. It'll probably be like early 2025, like January, February timeframe, but just kind of stand by because there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm still building out the back end before I officially launch it.
Dude, that's super cool. Any advice that you want to give?
Freaking send it. If you guys want to do something, you can do it. There's literally nothing like I hate when people are like, "Oh, there's no money and freaking blah 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 lifeguarding don't." Yes, there is. You just move up. Like here's the thing: if you'll learn the skill set of like what you actually want to do, you can find a way to move up the rank later. Because I'll just tell you, lifeguarding. Yeah, you can look at it and you're like, "Oh, well, I only get paid $12 an hour." Well, here's the thing: if you learn how to lifeguard really well and then you go back to school and now you're an instructor, now you can certify lifeguards, and you can do that at $500 a pop. You can then go to all of the resorts and you can teach all their lifeguards, and those certifications expire every 2 years, so you now have a repeating clientele. Not only that, but you're in Hawaii, you're in Guam, you're in Saipan, you're in freaking, Tahiti, wherever these lifeguards are, right? Like you're teaching it. If you wanna learn how to do like outdoor education and you're like, well, we get paid minimum wage, we can't do this. There's program director positions. And if you can actually get into these positions where you're creating a program that can then return the company money because you're damn good at your job, I guarantee you they're going to pay you what you're worth to keep you there, because they're not going to want to let the program go with you. So I guess my advice to anybody would be not to let somebody's own perspective on what you're trying to do influence your decision, because ultimately they don't know what kind of life you're going to live. So how can they possibly have any opinion on that?
That is well said, and something that I think more people need to take into account.
I agree. The
With
world would
that,
look.
thank you for your time.
Yeah. Reach out if you ever need follow up or whatever. I mean, I'm available. The time difference is the only tricky part, but
Sweet. Thanks, Zach.
yep. Peace out, Scott. Later.